and we're going to go a little bit of a recap for last week because I failed to record it. And I'm just starting at the top of page 25 with the exciting paragraph that starts, "There is a solution." So last week, what we discussed is that there is hope in what we're doing. And that when we identify the unmanageability in our life and that it's from our drinking, we are then ready to surrender and let go. And so it says, as the closing line of last week, and I love this, this is pure poetry that Bill Wilson wrote. "We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension, existence of which we had not even dreamed." So just pay attention, and you will already notice how much your life has improved, right? You're staying sober one day at a time. And many of you have said that you've had decades of not being able to do that, yet it's working now. And even if there's been a slip, you've come right back because you're starting to pay attention that you have to do the work. I can't do it for you. It's not called into thinking, it's called into action. And this chapter is called "There is a Solution." So where we are now is on the paragraph is the great fact. So this is halfway down page 25. The great fact. Now, what is a fact? It's an established truth. So Bill chooses his words carefully. He doesn't say the great idea. He says the great fact is just this and nothing less. That we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences. And I've circled spiritual experiences, and notice there's an asterisk there. And at the bottom, it says fully explained in Appendix 2. Now, I'm going to get to that in a minute. I'm not jumping straight into spiritual experiences right now. But it then says, which have revolutionized. Now, what does revolution mean? It means to completely upset on end and start with a whole new way of thinking. Because when I came into this program, what did I have to change? Pretty much everything. You know, because I had decades of drinking to not feel. So one of the revolutionary things I'm doing from the very beginning is I'm starting my morning with Meditated 8 and meditation and getting myself into the place where I surrender my willpower. That doesn't mean I don't make plans for the day, but what I do is I let go of outcomes. So just reflect on that for a minute. When we go into something with expectations, we make our plans for the day, and then it's human nature largely to think, okay, I'm going to control this, and the result I want is X. And anything less than that result is not going to be good enough. So part of what we're doing in early sobriety, and this is super important, if you hear nothing else from this meeting, I want you to hear, let go of expectations. That for me, on a daily basis, removes a huge weight on my shoulders because my alcoholic mind tells me that I can control life, I can control you, I can control your sobriety, I can control the reactions of everything that I've got planned for the day that involve other people. In other words, I'm taking my will back and I'm playing my own HP. I'm being my own higher power. I'm acting like God. I'm being the director. How do I get to a position of humility and let go of thinking that I've got that much power? I surrender. Okay? Take away the burden of thinking that you are responsible for how every person you interact with, every institution you interact with, that you've got control over it. right? That's when we start getting pompous and full of ego, thinking we have anywhere near that sort of power. We
Right.
don't. So it says here, we have revolutionized our whole attitude
Right.
towards
Going your
life.
4:30?
I'm in it right now.
Oh,
Life, right? We have going to have a whole different attitude towards life, towards our fellows. And I'm reading now from that paragraph, starting the great fact. Revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, towards our fellows and our sisters, and towards HP's universe. Because I say HP instead of God, because it's a God of your understanding. This is a spiritual program, not a religious one. And then he says again, notice he started off the great fact. Now he's saying the central fact. What is the central fact? It's the truth. The great fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty. There's no room for doubt in our connection to our higher power. When we've got to step 3, remember step 2 was we were willing to open the door to a concept of an HP. In step 3, we said, yep, there's HP and I'm connected. So it's saying right here, the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and our lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. Now, that doesn't mean we suddenly are connected to a certain religion. We might have been going to church all along, but we may not have been connected to our higher power in the way which is indeed miraculous. The indeed miraculous part is we've surrendered and we've stopped trying to play God. Okay? He has commenced, he has begun to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. So that needs to be underlined, highlighted. So in other words, I'm turning my life, my willpower, over to HP. And you know what's so brilliant about that? Is my load is lightened so much. So remember, I've been talking about how we carry around such a heavy suit of armor. And when I came in here as a not sober individual, I was weighed down by a suit of armor. And each plate of that suit of armor was an experience I had or a way of behaving that I had learned over years, self-defensive mechanisms. They were my suit of armor. Every piece of my heavy suit of armor was me playing a higher power, me being God. I felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders. I felt like I could control what happened with my parents' death. I felt like I could have controlled my mother passing before I got to see her. That weighed very heavily on me. Who am I to think I've got that sort of power? Who am I to think that I had anything to do with the way she went or how I have my relations with my sisters or my brothers? That is all I have to do is be willing. And my higher power is going to organize those relations as they're meant to be. So as long as my side of the street is clean and I'm living honestly, and we do this later on with our step 4 when we make our inventory, and later with our amends and all the rest of it, we're not there yet. But where we are is mentally letting go in our step 3 with this idea that we can play God. Now I'm at the bottom of page 25. If you are as seriously alcoholics as we were, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. Now, what am I saying here? I'm saying I've got to surrender, right? 100%. There's no middle of the road solution. You're either in the program or you're not in the program. And we know from experience just within this group that nobody can do the work for each individual. It's up to you to do your homework. It's up to you to do your step work. I can make suggestions on how to do it. I can ask you the questions, but it's up to you to do the work. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible. And I've circled the word impossible. That's step one stuff, guys. What is it? Unmanageable, right? Right back to step one. And if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. So if you're still thinking, what is it when it says you're passing into a region from which there's no human aid? In other words, if you're still in self-control and thinking you can fix this, you're not in the program. Because step 2 and 3 is where we are turning our self-will over and accepting that a power greater than ourselves is going to help us out. Okay, so two alternatives. One, go to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation. What is our intolerable situation? Again, this is step one stuff. Our unmanageability, our drinking. It's intolerable to other people, and our body is saying it's intolerable. That's why you're getting things like neuropathy or constant vomiting, or you're getting, all the things that come with it, the inability to sleep. You guys know the drill. You know what happens when you go back into the drinking and detox cycle. It's intolerable as best we could. And the other, so one hand is intolerable, the other hand, very simple, spiritual help. Pretty easy choice. But yet constantly, I as an alcoholic, with my alcoholic thinking and my ego, I'm going to want to go back into the way I've been doing things for years, because that's what I know, right? Every time an emotion comes up in me, or a disappointment, whether it's government or whether it's finances or relationships or whatever, I don't want to feel those feelings. So I drink or I use. I am stuck in my maturity level at the point where I started relying on substances because I couldn't process human emotions. And I see a lot of nodding going on. So this is obviously hitting some home, right? We're immature emotionally because we stopped maturing at the point where we started relying on alcohol or drugs. So that's why he's saying in the previous paragraph that we need a spiritual experience in order to get out of self. And I'm going to make a note here that I need to go back, and Amy, please make a note here that I need to go back and explain the spiritual experience, because I don't think I'm going to go there today. That's not where I think we need to be. One is to go to the bitter end, blotting out the unconsciousness of our intolerable situation. What is that? Denial. Denial. And I go back and I do what's comfortable for me. And what's comfortable for me is to drink, because I've been doing it for years. And I may be sober for a few days, and then I'm not working the program. I'm not deep enough into step 1 and 2 and 3. I may be going to meetings. I may be listening to a lot of stuff, but I'm not working on my foundation. Step 1, 2, and 3 are my foundation. I've got to say, I'm powerless over alcohol, and mean it. Knowing that I have an allergy to it, that I can never go back. And we know that it's every alcoholic's fantasy that one day they're going to drink like normal people. Guys, that's off the table. And if you're going to admit powerlessness and you're thinking, I'm going to do this for 30 days, like you're going into rehab for 30 days to get better, and then you're going to drink again, you have not given up. You have not surrendered. You are only 95% in for that 30 days you're in rehab, because you're already thinking, what am I going to do when I get out? You're already at the back of your mind thinking, oh, I'll clean up for a bit and I'll go back out and I'll drink like normal people. I have fully surrendered to the fact I do not drink like normal people. I do not drugs like normal people. So once we've accepted that, The other option, on the other hand, is we're going to accept spiritual help. And if you're at that point, you're ready to do step 3 prayer, and you're ready to move on to the 4th step. But not until you have 100% fully surrendered. That's your foundation. Okay, so now it says at the bottom of 25, flipping over to 26, this we did because we, and I've circled the word at the top of 26, honestly. Now, what does that mean? Time to get honest with myself. Because at the end of the day, don't know about you guys, but I was always lying to myself. I was always saying, oh yeah, I can do this. I'm in it. I'm in the program. But I was only in the program for what worked for me. When I was asked to do things that made me uncomfortable, like the homework and working the step homework, I didn't want to do it. So I wasn't being honest with myself. We honestly wanted to, and we were willing. So circle willing. So give yourself credit for turning up today. Give yourself credit for the days that you've got behind you sober, because that's not your experience normally. I am so darn proud of you guys that you're stringing these days together, because that isn't how you came into this room. And now we're at the top of 26. A certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. Okay, you can write in the left-hand margin because history has broken this anonymity. The people are long past. This guy's name is Rowland Hazard. Okay? For years, he had floundered from one sanitarium. What's a sanitarium? It was what they called, what they had for rehab back when this book was written. Okay? So we're looking at 85, 86 years ago. He had consulted the best known American psychiatrists. Now, Rowland had money. So he went to Europe and he placed himself in the care of a celebrated physician. Well, if you've ever studied psychology, Dr. Carl Jung is the man he saw, and he prescribed for him, it says. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Functioning alcoholic, right? You ever been a drinker that still held down a job until you didn't? Or still had respect of your colleagues until you didn't? Above all, he believed, okay, above all, underline it, because here's what takes him down. He believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that, here's the first time we see it in the big book, relapse was unthinkable. So I've written in the column next to this, self-knowledge does not work. You guys know all about treatment. You guys know all about alcoholism. And so does Rowland. He goes and he talks to the world's preeminent psychologist. He's, this is the foundation guy of much of what psychology texts are based on that we still study today. And he says it's unthinkable because he's in self-will. He's like, okay, I've been told what my problem is, therefore I can conquer it. No spiritual element. Do you see that? He's in self-will. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. Does this sound familiar? Self-knowledge avails us nothing. I read this big book and I thought, okay, I've done this now. And I drank again because I didn't understand a word of it. More baffling, more confusing to him still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. He had no idea why he relapsed. Okay? So what has happened here? Relapse. Sometimes we call it slip. So I've written next to this, sobriety lost its priority. Slip. I'm sure I can come up with fancy things for the word relapse too. But slip, that's what it is. Your sobriety has lost its priority. For that few minutes, and let's take on board something you need to know right now. Guys, it's a fleeting thought, isn't it? Your alcoholic mind in your own voice says to you, you can drink again like normal people, and you listen to it. You don't turn and look at your higher power or talk to your higher power and say, oh boy, I can't do that. I'm not wired like other people. So in other words, we lose our priority of listening to our spiritual energy, however it is designed for you. When I stop listening to HP and I listen to Jill, I know I'm in trouble. And that's why I have to go to Meditate at 8 every morning, because I wake up an alcoholic every morning. But I have to recalibrate. I have to get reconnected first thing with my higher power, because otherwise, left to my own devices, I very quickly will slip back into self-will. Does this make sense to you guys? Do you understand the need for surrender, 100% absolute honesty with yourself? There's no half measures here. And self-knowledge avails us nothing. I've got endless books on addiction and alcoholism, and I have read them all. So I've got a lot of knowledge about this, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to drink with that knowledge. The third step, connection to a something spiritual, good old HP. And then I don't have the responsibility for it as long as I stay connected, as long as I turn when that little devil in my own voice says to me, oh, a drink would be a nice idea right now. And we do it as chronic relapsers over and over and over again. That's not an option. Our higher power has to be everything or nothing. HP is my everything or it's nothing. There's no middle road in this program. So that's why if you're still relapsing, you haven't done step 1. You haven't admitted you're powerless. And that's where we go back to. You can have as much religion in your life as you want. You can go to church every day, and it's not going to make one bleeding bit of difference if you're not connected, if you haven't turned it over, if you haven't surrendered. So now we're on halfway down 26. So he returned to the doctor. So he goes back to Dr. Young, whom he admired, and asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished, I love this sentence, guys. Like, here's where he's coming from. He wished above all things to regain self-control. Can you see where he's coming at this from the wrong end? He's trying to get back into self-will. He's not connecting with his higher power. Have you ever been told when you've relapsed, oh, just, where's your self-will? Get your big girl or your big boy pants on and just don't drink. People don't understand that alcoholism is not only a physical disease, it's a spiritual sickness. It's a spiritual malady. And we can't lose sight of that. That is this program. If you can't get into a spiritual connection, it can't work for you. So that's why our steps 1, 2, 3 have to be solid. So here we got Roland saying, I wish I had self-control. It's not about self-control. He seemed quite rational and well-balanced with respect to other problems. In other words, he was successful. You're successful. You've been successful at all sorts of things you've tried in your life, but you can't think your way out of picking up that drink. Yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Do you have any control over alcohol? Ask yourself the question. If your answer is no, then you're on step 1. You've done it, right? I'm powerless over alcohol. And my life is unmanageable as a result of my drinking. then what do? We immediately move on to the idea of becoming willing that there's something greater than ourselves. And then he says, well, why was this? Next paragraph. He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he'd have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was the great physician's opinion. Lock you up and throw away the key. But this man still lives, and he is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men, free spiritually, men may go, or women, without disaster. In other words, what is disaster? Drinking again, using again. Provided, okay, circle provided, here's the catch. He remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. Now, does anyone know what the certain simple attitude is you've got to have? You need spiritual help. It's that simple. Simple attitude. I believe. I believe in a power greater than myself. This is a very, very simple program. You only make it as hard as your ego will stand in the way, saying you can do it yourself. So now we're at the top of page 27. Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. And we've met some of them, right? Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with this doctor. The doctor said, so Carl Jung's saying, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. In other words, a hopeless alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where the state of mind, in other words, being in self-will, that's his state of mind. Did you guys get that? Because he said to the doctor that he wants to regain self-control. That's what he's come asking for. And the doctor's outright saying to him, where this state of mind, and he's saying, I've never seen a single case recover where that state of mind existed in the state it does with you. Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. Okay. So how do we get away from the gates of hell? He says to the doctor, is there no exception? Yes, replied Jung. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, and this is before Alcoholics Anonymous was established, alcoholics have had what are called, now underline and highlight this, vital spiritual experiences. And again, I draw you back to Appendix 2, which we're going to discuss later, what a spiritual experience is. Now, the doctor's saying, to me, these occurrences are phenomenon. Now, what are phenomena? They're basically, the definition is something that we can't explain, okay? It's something that isn't man-made, isn't explainable. They appear to be in the nature of, okay, highlight this, huge emotional displacement and rearrangement. So what I take that to mean is I've had this experience. I never had any spiritual experience or horror until I came into this program. I have had a huge emotional displacement. The fact I'm sitting here talking to you on a, Tuesday night, caring that so passionately as I do, that you understand this and get this the way I have, that is a huge displacement for me, because when I came into this program, the only person I cared about was me, because I was no different than Roller Hazard or most alcoholics. Most of us are really, when we come in here, in a very selfish place. It's all about us. It's all about poor me. What's happened? You drink too. If what happened to you, it happened to me. You drink too if you had the suffering in your life that I've got. And those are the things I drink at because I don't have a spiritual solution. Then it says, ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side. And underline this, completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. What is that new set of conceptions and motives? Living a spiritual life. It's real simple. You see how simple this is? I've replaced self-will and me thinking I can run the show with turning it over to a power greater than myself. That's my new set of concepts and my motives. Just like we read every morning on Awakening, I'm praying every day to get out of self. I'm not praying for myself. I'm praying for the ability to help others and to follow that guidance. As soon as I get out of Jill and into you, I'm okay. In fact, I have been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. Okay, so what is this? This is Carl Jung showing great humility because he's saying to his patient, and you got to remember in this day and age, this guy was having to take an ocean liner to get over to Europe to track down Carl Jung to have sessions with him. And he's now been there 2 times because he has gone back and drank again. So he's putting a lot into his recovery, but now he's gone back and the great doctor is saying to him, I've never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. Now it says, upon hearing this, our friend Roland was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. This hope. Okay, and that's where it starts. This hope. Okay? This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctor telling him that while his religious convictions, his church going was good, but in this case, they did not spell, and here it comes again, the necessary, vital spiritual experience. And again, that takes us to the appendix, page 567. Now, notice the word vital before that. Vital, life-giving, life-dependent. So he is telling him, unless you have this rearrangement, which this emotional rearrangement, unless you have this spiritual experience, you're doomed. And he's saying to him, and I've written this on the side, the spiritual part is not negotiable. And that doesn't mean turning up at church does it, any more than turning up at meetings every day does it. You guys are now starting to be able to identify how important it is to go through the steps with a sponsor, line by line, and do the steps, right? You're hearing that, aren't you, in the meetings? When you talk to people that are chronically relapsing, this group included, they've never been through the steps like this. But now you're taking the action to make that spiritual connection. And if you're not there yet, it's okay. You're just starting to embrace the idea. That's step 2. And you tell me, are you ready to take the step 3 prayer? Are you willing to turn it all over to your higher power? And then we do the prayer together and you've done step 3. Okay, so now we're turning over to page 28. Here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. He had a spiritual experience. Next paragraph. We, in our turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men and women. What first appeared at first to be a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of HP, of God, of the higher power of your understanding, whatever it is. So it's saying here, hang on to the flimsy reed. Because what starts in step 2 as maybe something, imagine you're drowning and you're reaching out and you're trying to get to shore and you get a hold of this flimsy reed and you don't know if it's going to stick or not, but you hang on like a drowning person. And you then discover that you've got the loving and powerful hand of your higher power. It's up to you whether you let it stay flimsy reed or whether you get to solid ground. It's that core connection with your higher power that's going to get you there. And then here's the beautiful line. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, and circle this, highlight it, a design for living. That really works. It works if you work it. And write that down right next to it. This will work if I work it. The amount of energy that you put into your drinking career, I assume if it was like mine, was pretty grand. I put a lot of effort into thinking about it, getting it, hiding it, lying about it, repeat. You guys know the cycle. We know we can't drink, but we do anyway. But here, something's really going to work. This is a promise.